What does every NFL team need most in the 2025 NFL Draft? Welcome, football fans. In this video, I'm giving you the top needs for every NFL team in this year's draft, an in-depth breakdown of every NFL team's roster and my perspective on how they can improve in this year's draft. So if that sounds good and you like this style and substance, that's exactly what I provide my subscribers. So don't be a jabroni and subscribe. Gronk, spike the like button and let's go. Let's kick it off. We're going in alphabetical order here, guys, and I'm going to give you mostly the top 3 needs for every team, but I'll mention a couple secondary needs if they do pop out at me. So first, we have the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals could go in the first round, offense or defense, in my opinion. I've seen interior offensive line heavily mocked to them. That would make sense if they do want to replace Isaiah Adams at right guard. But I do think that Froholt is one of the more underrated centers in the league and fits their system perfectly. And they do have Evan Brown, who they just recently re-signed with that center guard versatility. Maybe, though, they view Evan Brown as a better backup than they do a starter. I'm not 100% sure, but he did play at a starting level last year. So interior offensive line, I do think will be addressed. I don't know if it's going to be the first round. Cornerback is a position I would really heavily look at if I were the Cardinals, because really, other than Garrett Williams, I feel like there's not a player on their roster that you feel confident about at corner. Max Melton and Elijah Jones were second and third round picks last year, though, so that might actually lessen the need to pick it in the first round. From a GM standpoint, from a roster building construction standpoint, do you really want to spend a first, a second, and a third in the last 2 years on one position? That's a little bit dicey. I don't really see that happening. Linebacker is a low-key need. I like Mac Wilson for what he is, but they could certainly upgrade. They did bring in Akeem Davis-Gaither, but they did lose Kaiser White. So I'd look at those 3 positions as big needs for this team. They already solidified their edge, in my opinion. They could always add more, but Josh Sweat with Baron Browning and Darius Robinson, also a first-round pick from last year. So they spent a first-round pick on the edge position last year. He's a hybrid D-lineman defensive end. It's unlikely that they'll spend it on another pass rusher after putting so much money into Sweat and high capital into Robinson and also re-signing Baron Browning. And they took care of their defensive tackle with Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson. So I'm thinking linebacker, corner, interior offensive line as the positions of need. Wide receiver would not be shocking either if they did pick one in the second or the third round, because I think they could get better at wide receiver too. So if there's a prospect that they do really like, I think they could provide a nice option for Kyler Murray on the outside over a Wilson or a Dortch, who are just okay, but nothing special. Marvin Harrison Jr. did not have a great rookie season, so they could get a little bit more from that position. So the Arizona Cardinals, look out for those positions on draft day. Now, the next team is the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, in my opinion, still need pass rush. I think edge is their biggest need, and I think that's where they should go without a doubt in the first round. Like, if I were them, I would be doing everything I could to maneuver myself into a position to get the best edge that I possibly want for this scheme. Whether that's, Green or Walker or whoever it is, like Stewart maybe. I don't know who they want, but edge should be the position that they covet because, let's be fair, Leonard Floyd does help a little bit. He is a gamer. He's a guy that's going to be there reliably for all 16 games pretty regularly, and he puts up good sack production, and he's been an effective edge setter in this Raheem Morris defense in Los Angeles, where he had his best seasons of his career, in my opinion, but he's not a number 1 edge rusher. He was not even a great number 2 for the 49ers last year. He did put up sacks, but his consistency definitely fell off from the year previous in Buffalo. And even in Buffalo, it felt like he kind of declined down the stretch of that season. So he has his moments still, but he's older. You don't want him to be your long-term guy. Other than that, Arnold Ebiketie is a second-round pick from 2022. He's had some flashes, but I'm not even sure he's really a starter in this league. So I'd be looking at edge multiple times in the first 3 rounds. Like, I'd probably be spending 2 of my first 3 picks on this position because Atlanta has had a desperate need for this spot so many years now. I mean, I don't remember the last time they had a great pass rusher. Like, they had that one season from Vic Beasley, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, I feel like it's going all the way back to like Abraham or something in the 2000s, where they really had a guy that could get to the quarterback reliably season to season, year to year, right? Like, Atlanta needs an edge guy that can just do it on his own instead of schematically, and that would really help Raheem Morris in his defense. Corner is another position to look for. I would be focused on that position in the 2nd or the 3rd round because Raheem Morris is not a guy in his system that really needs great corner play, and he already does have a true number 1 guy in A.J. Terrell. They seem to also like Mike Hughes, who has finally kind of become a player in the NFL after I loved him like way back when he was drafted. And they can also cover up the holes at safety with Jesse Bates. They did sign Jordan Fuller, who I think they view as a starter because he's been a good player with Raheem Morris in Los Angeles, and I like Jordan Fuller, so I think he'll start there at free safety or strong safety, depending on what they look at with Jesse Bates. I mean, Jesse Bates is more of a free safety, but he can do either one. But when it comes to me, Atlanta, I don't think safety is really on the board early, maybe a little bit later for a guy that could develop behind Fuller, right? Bates isn't exactly young either, so I think edge heavy, often early. Corner, definitely within the first 3 rounds. Center is another position that I think is really big for them after they lost Drew Dalman, who was a top 10 center in the NFL. And despite his inconsistencies of playing, necessarily staying on the field, I think that's a position that they could draft. But again, center's a position that you can find in the 3rd or 4th round and be fine. Like, you don't have to draft the 1st or 2nd round center. You can even find a center that's undrafted or a 6th rounder. Like, the Patriots got Dave Andrews undrafted. So, like, that happens. You can get a guy like that, especially if it's the weakest part of your O-line on an otherwise pretty good offensive line, right? And you have other players here. Like Matthew Bergeron could potentially move to center if they really wanted him to. Elijah Wilkinson could still probably play as a starter in this league. They've got some depth there on the O-line where they could move some things around as well. So, and I'm not sure how they view the current projected starter on their roster. Defensive tackle is also a position that's been brought up, but they did spend a 2nd round pick there last year on a Rojo. Sounds like Scooby-Doo. David Onyemata and Morgan Fox are the other guys. Morgan Fox was just signed to replace Grady Jarrett. David Onyemata is getting older, though, so that's a position that maybe they could help out with some depth. But again, I think it's edge, a little bit of cornerback, some center help. But that's Atlanta overall. I mean, if Michael Penix can have a breakout season, if they can continue to get elite production from their run game, Drake London can still be a star, all that sort of stuff, and they can kind of get their defense from bottom tier of the league to like middling with this draft, they could be a really interesting NFC South type of winner. I know I've been really down on them, but that's out of frustration from their coaching and their general manager. Next, we've got the Baltimore Ravens, who don't need a lot of things. I mean, let's be fair. And that's why I didn't include them in my most interesting teams in the draft, guys. But edge is the position that I would target if I were the Ravens, because I think that's the position that could make or break them as a Super Bowl champion. You look at Kyle Van Noy, and also they've got, Owe, who's been pretty good. David Njoku, I should say. They're hoping, I guess, can develop a little bit more. He was working back from an injury in 2023. 2024, he played a little bit more. And then, you've got Tavius Robinson as well, who's more of like an edge setter type. He's not exactly like a finesse edge rusher. I think they could use a spark to their pass rush, like a little bit of athleticism. So if somebody falls at the end of the 1st round with that sort of profile, like let's say Pierce out of Tennessee, could they land somebody like that? That would be interesting to me because Kyle Van Noy is getting really old. You can't rely on Kyle Van Noy to be your guy. In my opinion, like he's more reliably a number 2 edge rusher in this league. Like I know he was amazing last year and he was even very good the year before, but you need something else. I feel like you need one more spark at that position. Otherwise, guard is a position to look for, as they did lose left guard Makari to the Jacksonville Jags. So I do think they view Voorhees potentially as a starter, if I'm not being out of line with that. And Ben Cleveland also is a decent backup, but I think they could definitely add that position. The Ravens love to supplement their draft with the offensive line, supplement that offensive line with the draft, I should say. Then you have DB, whether it be safety or corner. I think they could add either position, maybe even a versatile defensive back that could play both positions would be ideal. And that could also allow you to move around Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton into where you see fit. They did sign Chidobe Awuzie, which was a savvy signing to help them on the perimeter. And I think that could be an upgrade if he stays healthy over Brandon Stevens. I do think that is more in line with like what Ronald Darby gave them a couple years ago. But I do think corner safety, either way, could be interesting. Safety has been very much a mocked position for them, but Adarius Washington was one of the best roamers of the field last year. PFF had him as like a top 6 safety in the league and one of the best coverage safeties in the league. So look out for Adarius Washington to have a true breakout season, but I think even adding a third safety, having that versatility as well, could be pretty interesting. Linebackers also an interesting position because I'm not a huge Trenton Simpson fan, but he does enter year 3. So this could be his breakout year if they really trust his development. Then they'll stick with him. Obviously, they felt like they could move on from previous linebackers like Harrison went to Pittsburgh, who was not very good in my opinion. And then they let go of Patrick Queen. So maybe they wanted to get cheaper and younger at that position, but I could see them going with a mid-round pick at linebacker as well. Otherwise, they kind of took care of wide receiver. The tackle position they took care of with Ronnie Stanley, and Rosengarten enters year 2, so that's promising. Tight end, they have one of the best sets in the league. Keaton Mitchell returns at running back to really be a true backup with Justice Hill as that third down back to Derrick Henry, so they don't need anything there. Really, this is just a team that's looking to add the final touches to a team that could win the Super Bowl. Next up, we've got the Buffalo Bills, another team that doesn't need a lot, but I would say they have more of a make or break on their hands in terms of they could really do something with this draft because they have 2 second-round picks and a first-round pick in comparison to Baltimore, where Baltimore, I feel like, they don't have a ton of selections where it's going to really change the output of their roster because I think they mostly have their starters. Like, even if they draft an edge guy in the first round, is he really going to see starting snaps? Probably not. He's probably going to play in some sort of rotation. While Buffalo could draft like a starting safety, they could draft a starting corner. And those are two of the needs, the 2 top needs in my opinion. I thought their safety position was lackluster last year, slow, and just not rangy enough and not playmaking enough. They did sign Derek Forrest, who I'm a fan of, but I don't think he's necessarily a reliably starting safety in this league. Cole Bishop is interesting entering year 2 as a second-round pick, and I like him, but I think he's ideally more of a box safety. I like Taylor Rapp as well. I felt like he was overall their best safety, but he's limited due to his range. He's not very quick or fast, but he is very smart. And downhill as an extra linebacker type, he's pretty good. I think Damar Hamlin needs to be replaced as a starter, and I think he's fine as depth. He's fine as a 3rd or 4th safety, but hopefully they're looking at Cole Bishop as taking that step as a starter potentially. And, you know, you look at this position for McDermott's defense, it's been crucial over the years, especially in Buffalo. Like, you look at Micah Hyde, right? You look at Jordan Poyer, what those guys were able to do in tandem over the years. So maybe they could find a long-term free safety in this draft to pair with Cole Bishop. That would be ideal for long-term. But I think corner is probably the position they should go with in the first round. I know that they've struggled with that position in the draft in the past, but that is their screaming need. I don't think they want Dane Jackson to be their starter at perimeter corner. So finding somebody with, I don't know what they're going to look for. Are they going to look for a guy that can maybe play a little bit more man, maybe a little bit more speed? Are they going to go off of their type, or are they going to stay with that kind of longer zone type of corner where they've failed with picks like Kaiir Elam? Linebacker's pretty good. I wouldn't be worried about that. They actually have like 4 capable linebackers in my opinion. Defensive end is definitely upgraded this offseason with Joey Bosa and Michael Hoyt. And then they did add Larry Ogunjobi to defensive tackle. So they've actually already gotten better than last year roster-wise, which is promising. But they still have those 2 screaming needs in the secondary. Wide receiver, I wouldn't rule out. Their offensive line is complete. I wouldn't really worry about that other than depth. Tight end is great. Running back, as long as James Cook decides to play, you should be fine. Wide receiver, I'm kind of conflicted on adding it to this list just because they do have Keon Coleman entering year 2. They did sign Josh Palmer to replace Mac Hollins, but I still feel like they're missing something. Yeah, Curtis Samuel is still on the team, and yes, Khalil Shakir is their go-to guy. but I feel like they're missing something. They're missing like an X speed threat or something. So look out for a pick maybe in the mid rounds just to add that type of player that can just play the X and maybe vertically stretch a defense, kind of like a John Brown-esque player for the Bills, but not as good probably, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I'm looking at that, but I think defensive line could always be had for McDermott's defense, whether it be edge or interior. I think they could use a big edge, a big run setter, but I think Dwayne Carter is interesting entering year 2 as well. So really it's corner safety primarily, and then what they want to do at wide receiver and defensive line. Next up, we've got the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, I think their needs are fairly obvious. They need a defense. They had a historically bad defense last year. I think that edge is probably the position they'll pick in the first round just because they don't have a number 1 edge rusher. The thing with Carolina is they've got a bunch of guys that can be number 2s, like Clowney, DJ Wonham, and Patrick Jones have all produced, and 2 of them in Minnesota, like a fair amount of pressure and sack production. Patrick Jones is also kind of a hybrid off-ball linebacker, edge rusher, weird style of player. Like he's kind of a chess piece type of player. Wonham, him and Clowney's getting older too. They're more 2s and 3s. So ideally, they can find a long-term edge rusher that can finally replace Brian Burns, which looking back at that, I know Brian Burns hasn't been amazing since they've traded him and was dipping when they did trade him. But, I mean, missing that type of player has definitely hurt this defense. I think their interior is low-key pretty strong and pretty deep. They did sign Bobby Brown and Tershawn Wharton to give them 2 different body types, a run defender and kind of a slitherer pass rusher. And then Derek Brown is a stud. And then A'Shawn Robinson is a guy I've always liked. Shai Tuttle is solid. So they have enough in the interior. I'm not worried about that. Linebacker, I feel like they did add Christian Roseboom, which might lessen the need. But I wouldn't be surprised if they picked a linebacker at 8, if they picked an edge rusher at 8. I think a corner would be a bit of a reach because they put so much money into J.C. Horn. There isn't really a safety to pick at that spot. But looking at Carolina, I think their biggest needs are edge, like a number 1 edge, and that's likely to be their pick in the first round. Later in the draft, I think they'll target nickel and safety in some way, shape, or form because they did bring in Trayvon Moehrig and they did sign Nick Scott, but I don't love their safety position. It's very thin as well. And nickel is like really terrible on paper right now. Now, there still are free agents out there that they could sign, but they've been kind of nickeling and diming the nickel position. And they've kind of been nickel and diming the safety position over the last few years, and it hasn't worked out. So I think adding some youth would be nice. Wide receiver is also a huge position. So I kind of think that they're going to go edge and then wide receiver. That would probably be what happens. And then later in the draft, they'll go safety, nickel, corner, maybe defensive, linebacker. Those are positions that they could target a little bit later. Tight end is also a possibility, but a tight end is not huge in this offense though. I think they're fine with their tight ends, although it's not a strong position for them. They have Sanders entering year 2. Tommy Tremble is a decent athlete. They do have good running backs. They have like 2s and 3s at receiver, but they could use another guy, especially a guy that could play on the outside and really run. That would be something that they could add because Adam Thielen will play the slot short term. Jalen Coker can be like that move receiver. They do like David Moore as depth, and then Xavier Legette hopefully develops into a number 1, but I kind of think he's more of a number 2. So Carolina might miss out on another receiver this year, but I think they should take a swing. Chicago is next up. Chicago, I think, has a couple needs remaining, but honestly, looking at this roster is very well refined and very well defined. Like, I kind of understand what they're looking at here. Now, in terms of their needs, I think running back is going to be a position that they do target early because it's Ben Johnson's offense. So if Ashton Genty is sitting there at 10, I think they're going to go with him. And even if Hampton's there, I think they might select Hampton at number 10. So I think either way, running back will be a real possibility very early in this draft. If they do not pick a running back in the first round, I think it could be a second round pick type of selection. Maybe at worst, like a third round pick. But I think they're going to go for a running back. Somebody that they really like to complement DeAndre Swift and hopefully replace DeAndre Swift, right? DeAndre Swift is fine, but he's not some special player like a Jahmyr Gibbs was in Detroit, right? And that's what really took Detroit over the top as an offense, was that explosive game-changing talent at running back that could do a lot of everything, right? And that's both of those top 2 backs in this draft. You look at wide receiver as being a low-key need at wide receiver 3. Zacchaeus is a wide receiver 3, but I wonder if they're still waiting on Keenan Allen. I do kind of question that. I don't think so. But wide receiver 3 was one of those bonus needs that I would throw out there as well. So maybe a depth pick. I do think defensive line and edge outside of running back are the primary needs. More so than tackle. Because I am a Braxton Jones believer. They also spent a 3rd-round pick on a tackle last year. So he's there as well that's developing. Darnell Wright is very solid, and he's a 1st-round pick from 2 years ago. So, considering that they spent so much capital on Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, and Joe Thuney, I don't think they're going to spend a 1st or 2nd-round pick on a tackle. I just don't see it happening, especially after, like I said, they spent a 3rd-round pick last year, and Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright are both top 25 tackles in terms of their grading last year. I think a lot more has to be put on Caleb Williams for his responsibility to get the ball out and understand what he should be doing in terms of his dropbacks, his pocket presence, things like that. I don't think we can just blame the offensive line for everything, but the interior has been fixed here. So edge is a big position because, yes, they signed Odenigbo from the Colts. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Very much a Dennis Allen archetype, Cameron Jordan type player, but they need kind of, I think, like another guy that can really get to the quarterback. Like, he's never been a 10-sack player. Montez Sweat, even at his best, is not like a game-changing defensive end while he is very good, and I like him a lot. Like, I would love him to be on my team. But you look at their depth, like Daniel Hardy, Austin Booker, these are not great 3s and 4s in the NFL at defensive end. So they could definitely use an edge early in this draft for Dennis Allen's defense. And then defensive tackle is still kind of a need because Grady Jarrett is very old. They did spend a 2nd-round pick on Dexter a couple years ago, right? And also Pickens in the 3rd round a couple years ago. Andrew Billings is pretty good too. So they do have a decent 1, 2, 3. It's just that I don't think they have a young stud at that position. And then other than that, I mean, maybe safety, like later in the draft, but Elijah Hicks is not terrible. Jonathan Owens is a pretty good 3rd safety. And Kevin Byard is still kicking. So I don't know. Like the Bears, I think it's pretty well defined. Running back should be a high priority. Defensive line should be the next priority. And then whatever else you want to do, whether it be tackle, wide receiver, safety, whatever else you want to add on to that. Next, you've got the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that guard, edge, corner are going to be the primary needs. Now, basically on offense, all they should be looking for is guard. Guard. Okay, right now they've got Volson, who's never been good, but he's been starting for multiple years, so maybe they feel comfortable with him. And Cody Ford is a starting guard right now on their team. I'm not sure about that one, folks. Lucas Patrick also was signed, but he's also not really starting caliber. He's more of like a hybrid, versatile backup. You don't really want him to be your starter. Center, guard, he's hybrid, but he's not really a starter. Okay, and Cody Ford is more of a backup too. So I think they should be taking a guard with one of their first 2 picks. Just to, because you're thinking about it. I mean, what could really ruin this offense? It's interior pressure. Like every team that's going to be playing Joe Burrow this year and the Bengals, their sole goal, because they know they can't cover them and they know that they're going to get their plays in the passing game. The sole goal will be to disrupt the pocket and to get interior pressure. So they need to solidify guard. Ted Karras is a good center, but they need another guard there to at least have another solidified piece for the long term on the offense. Edge should be a big look because right now Joseph Osai is a starter, and I'm not sure about that. Miles Murphy also enters year 3, but he has not really shown much in his NFL career. So as long as Trey Hendrickson stays, they're only looking for an edge 2, which is definitely findable in a draft in the top 20 if they want to spend an edge. If they have a guy that they really like, right, you could go edge in the 1st round and then get another starter there, and all of a sudden, okay, Osai's your 3, Sample's in the mix, you've got Miles Murphy in the mix. Now you've got some decent depth there behind those 2 starters. Like, let's say they get Green or whatever. That would be beautiful. Now you've got a guy for the long term to replace Hendrickson and a 2 for now to complement Hendrickson while he's developing. Defensive tackle is also a position that I think they need, but I don't think it's drastic because I like TJ Slayton a lot. I think that's a great signing. Chris Jenkins was okay. McKinley Jackson also there as second and third round picks from a year ago. So they're their depth players and they're developing, but right now BJ Hill and TJ Slayton should be their starters. And I actually like that duo quite a bit. So I don't think defensive tackle is actually drastic. It might come like later in the draft. So it's defensive end first and foremost for the defense. And then after that, some people are saying linebacker, but they did add Oren Burks. They do still have Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson. So I don't view linebacker as a huge need, especially with the new defensive coordinator being a linebacker first type of coach. And then the secondary, I like DJ Turner. I've always liked Cam Taylor-Britt. He was very inconsistent last year, and he's more of a CB2 than a CB1, clearly based on his play last year. Dax Hill, where is he going to find a spot? Is he going to play nickel this year? That could change some things up. Geno Stone, Jordan Battle at safety. Like, a lot of fine is what I'm looking at. They just don't have, I think a CB1 would really change this defense, or even like a very solid veteran. If I were the Bengals, I'd be signing like a Stephon Gilmore in free agency, and I'd also be drafting a corner. But I definitely think they need to draft a corner. I think they need to draft an edge and a guard. Those would be the biggest positions that I would be looking at. And then after that, I think safety, defensive tackle, those kind of positions can fill out your draft. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Brownies. Browns need, now this one was interesting. I think that wide receiver is a big need for them. So if they can get Travis Hunter at number 2, I think that would take care of that need. Obviously, they need a quarterback, but I'm not really even going to speak on that. I mean, like, they could, if they don't want a quarterback at 2, then you're not going to get a starting caliber quarterback. You're probably going to get a developmental prospect, right? Unless you get somebody like maybe Tyler Shuck, right? Tyler Shuck is a little bit older. And yes, he doesn't have like a ton of experience at the college level, but he is older and developed as a player. Like, his game is a little bit more ready. I think another guy that's a little bit more ready, but you're taking a chance because he's small, is Dylan Gabriel. I'll actually be making a video about Dylan Gabriel. I love him a lot. If they like him, that's another guy. And he's actually kind of similar to Baker in terms of the size and things like that. Kenny Pickett, they did bring in to be like a bridge option if somebody is not ready. I'm not sure, if they like Jackson Dart or if they would trade up into the first round with their first pick in the second round to get somebody like Shedeur Sanders if he falls, which is looking like it could happen. So there's a lot of different approaches they could take to quarterback, but I definitely would be interested in a quarterback in this draft if I were them. I would be picking one, especially with all the picks that they do have. I would be definitely selecting a quarterback. It's a matter of where and who that they want. I'm not sure. Wide receiver, I like Jerry Jeudy. I like Cedric Tillman, but they need another receiver. So Travis Hunter, or a little bit later in the draft if Travis Hunter is not going to be their choice at 2. Tackle is also a position of need. DeJuan Jones is listed as the left tackle right now. He's been inconsistent throughout his career. Jack Conklin is currently listed as the right tackle. He's old and injury prone. They did bring in Cornelius Lucas, who's a very good backup. And also Tevin Jenkins is a very good guard backup. And he can also play tackle. Not very good at tackle, but much better at guard. But they don't need guard. They don't need center. Tackle, I would consider. But I think it will be more so somebody a little bit in the 3rd, 4th type of range. I don't think they'll be picking one relatively high. Running back is also a position that I think they'll target in the mid rounds because Jerome Ford is not a starting caliber running back. He's more of a change of pace player. So they need somebody to be their new Nick Chubb. So somebody in the 2nd or 3rd round would not surprise me for them. And then defensively, they don't need a lot. I mean, I'm looking at the list. Linebacker was the one that screamed at me. So JOK is injured, and he has a very serious injury. So linebacker, they did pick up Jerome Baker, he can start. Devin Bush played very well for them last year, and they still have Jordan Hicks. So that could be enough. But I think you do want a little bit of youth, considering that Baker's getting old, Hicks is getting old, right? Bush has never been a true starter, although he's a good replacement for JOK because they're very similar players. I don't think they should be picking an edge. I think that would be kind of worthless. Like, I understand that Abdul Carter's an absolute monster, and that could make your entire defense super dangerous and tough to just defend as a defense. But Isaiah McGuire is pretty good. Alex Wright is interesting. They brought in Joe Tryon. They have Okoronkwo as well. I think they've got quite a bit of depth. But if they want to go that way, I won't necessarily be like upset. Defensive tackle, I think they're fine for now. Mike Hall Jr. is developing. Shelby Harris and Malik Collins are starting caliber as well. They don't need a corner. Safety, I think they're okay. I mean, they could get a little bit better. All right, next up, we've got the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos, in my opinion, their top two needs are playmaker. Like, I think the Denver Broncos, and I actually slightly went out of order. It should have been the Dallas Cowboys, but the Cowboys will be coming up, guys. Don't worry. Wide receiver and running back should be their top two needs, in my opinion. Now, the thing with wide receiver is that they've spent some picks on some young players, and they like those players. Like, Vele has developed well as a 7th-round pick. Marvin Mims was a 2nd-round pick in the first draft for Sean Payton, and he's been pretty darn good. Last year, he had a bit of a breakout. Not like amazing, but a breakout. And then Troy Franklin, they also are involving in their offense. So it feels like they have some comfort in those playmakers and the depth and the variety of what they provide. But the only real great receiver that they have is Courtland Sutton, right? Now, Evan Ingram does help. Maybe that's enough for them to steer away from wide receiver in the first, right? But 2nd or 3rd round would not surprise me if they added another receiver. This isn't exactly a great wide receiver class, though. Running back is probably going to be the pick in the first round if Hampton is there. But if Hampton is not there, that's where they might pivot to wide receiver. They might pivot to another position, and it's kind of difficult to figure that one out. Is it going to be an offensive line for the future, like a tackle to potentially be the replacement for Garrett Bowles, who is getting a little bit older? Could it be secondary depth? Secondary depth, I guess, would come a little bit later. Could it be just the best player, linebacker, edge rusher, just the best player they deem on the board, like a valuable position potentially? Corner, I mean, Riley Moss I like, but I felt like Riley Moss at times last year was kind of inconsistent and taken advantage of. So if you could add another great corner in the first round to Pat Surtain, and, that would be pretty interesting. So there's not a lot of screaming needs for this team. It's a very well-built roster, and it's very well-defined. Their interior defensive line is very good. Both of their edge rushers had 10-plus sacks. They added Dre Greenlaw. They added Talanoa Hufanga to kind of help out their two biggest weaknesses. But maybe they could add some development players. I think linebacker is more so fine because they've got Singleton. They've got Sternad, I believe is his name, and he's played it quite a bit. Drew Sanders is also very athletic and promising as well. So running back, wide receiver, maybe long-term tackle, maybe corner. Like, there's a lot of different, maybe edge 3, but there's not a lot of screaming needs here. So Broncos fans, let me know in the comments what you guys think about their needs in this draft. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys, which they should have been above the Broncos, but I can't do the alphabet, bro. So the Dallas Cowboys have a lot more needs than the Broncos, in my opinion. Now, the needs that I put as first and foremost were running back, wide receiver, defensive tackle. I think those are the biggest needs. They need a wide receiver, too, because they don't have one. It's not going to be Jonathan Mingo, I'm sorry to tell you. Jalen Tolbert is not a number 2. He's not even a number 3, in my opinion. I actually kind of prefer Turpin as their number 3, in my opinion. Tolbert had some moments, but he's never been any sort of consistent. I think it's time to give up on that experiment. So wide receiver 2 to help out CeeDee Lamb and have another guy that can separate and make plays for Dak Prescott. Will that come at 12? Will that come in the 2nd round? It should come early, in my opinion. It should come within the first 3 rounds at the very least. And I'd feel a lot more comfortable if it was 1st or 2nd round. Running back, I would more so prefer if they picked a receiver first and then a running back second, unless that running back is Genty. If that running back is Genty, I can understand it, okay? So running back and wide receiver, playmakers for Dak Prescott, that's got to be priority. After that, you've got defensive tackle. Could they use a bit of beef? I mean, their defense is very small, and if you look at some of the grades of the players that they brought in, they're very poor against the run. Solomon Thomas is a smaller defensive tackle. They brought him in. They're counting on Mozzie Smith to continue to break out in year 3, but he got a little bit better in year 2. He was atrocious in year 1. But Adigizua, they signed long-term. So I kind of think that defensive tackle will be more of a niche need, like a 3rd, 4th round pick where they're looking for a big-bodied nose tackle type, like a Jonathan Hankins, but a younger version. So I think that's kind of what they're going to be looking at. Defensive end, I think they're not going to prioritize because they did sign Dante Fowler. They do have Micah Parsons, who they're going to pay out the behind. They have Marshawn Nealon, who's interesting as a second-round pick entering year 2. Sam Williams also kind of interesting. And they brought in Peyton Turner. So I don't think they necessarily need edge that drastically. I don't think that's a big need for them. But I think defensive tackle on that defensive line, they need that type of nose tackle, eat space type of guy. Wide receiver, running back, nickel corner to replace Jordan Lewis is going to be, I think, a pick in like the 3rd round, if I had to guess. That's desperately a need, in my opinion, unless they move Bland into the slot again and they start Kaiir Elam, or they pick a perimeter corner and they move Bland in the slot. They could do that as well, and that would be fine because Bland can play both. And then offensive line-wise, I think they could use some depth. Linebacker, I don't really have on the list, despite them not having a great linebacker position. It is a little bit of a need, or an upgraded need, but they brought in Jack Sanborn, Kenneth Murray, and they have Overshown, who I like a lot, and they have Lufu. So those guys are younger and developing and promising, and I really like Overshown. I liked him at Texas too. But the offensive line, I think I kind of think that they're going to run with this offensive line as we see it. I just don't think it's a great one. I mean, Terrence Steele is one of the worst right tackles in the league. Brock Hoffman is a borderline starting caliber player. Cooper Beebe is a younger center. They brought in Robert Jones, but that's about it. Tyler Smith is a stud. Tyler Guyton was a 1st-round pick. So I think Dallas could use offensive line, but I just don't think they have enough picks to unless they look for one later in the draft. I mean, so prioritization should be playmakers. Then I think nickel, offensive line, and defensive tackle. I think that should be the way it goes. Detroit Lions are up next. The Lions, this is why they weren't in the interesting teams, because a couple of people asked me about that. They don't have a lot of needs. I think it's pretty... honestly, I couldn't even really find a third need that I was like, it was jumping out at me. I think their 2 top needs are very obvious. I think guard is a big need, unless they're going to start Christian Mahogany, who has one of the funniest names in the NFL. All name team for sure on my list. But, you add the fact that Graham Glasgow is a little old and Frank Ragnow is not a young chicken as well, and he's constantly beat up. I think they could use interior offensive line depth, or just a guy that can be a plug-and-play player. If they could get one in the 1st round, that would be perfect, right? So they've got both a short-term solution and a long-term solution. They obviously don't need tight end, running back, or quarterback. Wide receiver, I don't think is a need either. Honestly, I think Tim Patrick is a very nice number 3, and Khalif Raymond is the total opposite type of number 3. So it's like a good mix of a number 3 wide receiver. So offensively, they don't need anything except for guard. So that takes care of business 1st or 2nd round, in my opinion. Then you look at the defensive line, and I think that's where you start to begin to look at some more needs. I think defensive end is maybe the biggest need, or like the biggest need that could change their team. Like a game-changing pick. So if Detroit did want to trade up for a defensive end, I know that it's a deep position in this draft. That would be a position that I would be like, if Detroit wants to trade up, that would be the position I would do it at. Because Marcus Davenport, I'd be way more comfortable him as my 3, because he is always injured and he's just inconsistent in general, right? They do have guys that are fine or whatever, Josh Pascal and Muhammad, depth players, but I'm not in love with that depth chart. I think defensive tackle is low-key a strength of their team, despite everybody kind of saying they should pick one. Ali McNeil, DJ Reader, Roy Lopez, and Levi as well, who they just re-signed to a nice contract. I think they don't really need a defensive tackle, in my opinion. Linebacker, I think they've got good depth at that position and a nice starting 2. Jack Campbell broke out, and that really helps. Corner is definitely a need, in my opinion, and they should be looking at corner, whether it be early or late. I think they could. I like their top 3 guys, or even top 4. Ennis Rakestraw, to me, I think he's going to be more of a safety or a nickel, ideally. So if they want to add another perimeter corner, it would make sense. Arnold as well was a bit spotty. Amik Robertson was very nice in their defense. DJ Reed is a good player. I don't think they have a true CB1, but it's hard to find that where they're picking. So that's why it's not a huge priority on my list. And then safety, safety's weird because like I just said, I feel like Rakestraw could kind of be a backup safety and a backup corner too. And they signed Rock Ya-Sin. Like, this team is very loaded. They have a lot of depth. There's not a lot of concerns. I would say safety should maybe get a selection later in the draft. Defensive end, I would be really maybe even trying to move up for one that I really liked. And guard, I'd be trying to covet. Those would be the two positions I'm really looking at. Otherwise, I think they can kind of just pick the best player that they like, honestly. Next up, we've got the Green Bay Packers. The Packers, I think that cornerback, wide receiver, and defensive end are their clear needs. I think if they could somehow land a wide receiver, whether it be through a trade, I'm going to throw that out there, or a wide receiver in the first round, I would think about it. I would think about it. But I do think they should add wide receiver because of the health of Christian Watson. And like Josh Jacobs put it, we need a wide receiver one, like a true baller. So if they could somehow get that, that would really catapult their offense. But it's not a huge need because they do have 4, maybe even 5, players. They've got guys that can play. It's just like they don't have an alpha stud, right? Like Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Malik Heath, and Bo Melton. All have played for them and all have played decent, but they don't necessarily have a stud. So I think the only way I would be looking to spend my first round pick on a wide receiver in this draft would be if it were for a trade. Like if for some reason Tyreek Hill was available, sign me up. That would be it. But otherwise, maybe they don't even pick a wide receiver, which would be interesting because they do need defense. Their offensive line is good and they signed Aaron Banks, so I don't think they're going to really address that outside of maybe tackle depth. But other than that, I think they should be okay. So offensively, it's wide receiver, maybe tackle depth. Defensively, I guess maybe running back, maybe backup running back. They did pick Marshawn Lloyd, and I like Emmanuel Wilson, but running back's a possibility too in this class. Defensively, they need an edge rusher, a guy that can really get after it. But again, the weird thing about the Packers is you're not going to find the things they need in this draft. You're not going to find a 10-sack defensive end at whatever they're picking. I think 23. You're not going to find that guy in really any class. It's very, very inconsistent that you find that, right? So they could try to draft that and develop it, but they haven't exactly been hitting on guys like Lucas Van Ness. So it's tough. They could use defensive tackle depth after losing TJ Slayton. That's a slight concern. Carl Brooks is playable. Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt are one of my favorite duos in football. I love Rashawn Gary, but he needs some help. Lucas Van Ness needs to do more in year 3. Linebacker, I think, is a strength with Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper especially. I think it's turning into a strength. Quay Walker is a little inconsistent, but he's a little bit of a head case. But he's all right. I think corner will likely be their first pick, though, because Evan Williams and Javon Bullard, I think they like at safety, and McKinney's a stud. So they have their safety trio. Cornerback, Jair is always a question. Will he even get traded? But if he doesn't, okay, then all they really need is maybe a long-term CB2. Because Nate Hobbs would be an upgrade to their nickel spot. He's a good player. If he's your CB2 or a CB3, that's amazing, right? So you love that for Nate Hobbs. But I think they need a development corner to rather replace Alexander long-term or to complement him short-term or either way, right? Keyshawn Nixon, I like, but I don't think he's an irreplaceable starter. I think he's more ideally your 4th corner in a perfect world. Okay. He's a guy that can play nickel or outside, but he's not great at either one. He's just serviceable. He's feisty. I like his caliber of play. So that's the weird thing with the Packers is they need a wide receiver 1, maybe a cornerback 1 if Jair gets traded, but maybe CB2, and then defensive end 2-ish, right? That's what they need. So it's pretty clear. It's pretty defined. Tackle depth, running back depth, those will be positions they also address. It's just going to be hard for them to really land that. So look for edge, look for wide receiver early, look for defensive end early. Those would be the positions I would think. Houston Texans are next. This is obvious. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Guard, especially in my opinion. So I think early, they got at guard and tackle. I don't even know why I said especially guard. Both. Both. So they signed Cam Robinson, but he's on a 1-year deal. They signed Trent Brown. He's on a 1-year deal, and he's coming off an ACL. Both those players are talented, but inconsistent. Both could be starters and could be good, especially Trent Brown, but they both could fall on their face. So you can't rely on that. Blake Fisher was awful as a rookie last year. So I don't know if you want to rely on that. Titus Howard is better at guard, in my opinion, than tackle. So I think they'll keep him at guard, and I think that's one of your guards. So I think you're okay. Juice Scruggs ideally can play better at guard, but we'll see. Ed Ingram also there. Lincoln Tomlinson also there. Like, they signed a bunch of guys, but are any of them really starters? Jared Patterson, is he a starter? So offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Just best offensive line prospects in the first, the second, and maybe even the third damn round. Other than that, wide receiver, maybe. Right, Christian Kirk is only on a 1-year deal. And if Tank Dell is out, like, for a majority of the year, they do need, like, a proper 3. I think Berrios, Mechie, and Justin Watson can bring and provide, and Hutchinson can provide a 3 for the offense, with Christian Kirk being the 2. So I think they're fine at wide receiver. I think it's kind of their preference. They like to address that position a lot. Other than that, I mean, it's offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Defensive tackle, I guess. They could use a big defensive tackle because they're a little undersized, but their defense is absolutely ridiculously loaded. Like, they have like 3 starting caliber players at every position on their defense. Next, the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts, I think, need a quarterback, but they won't pick it. So after that, I think tight end is obvious. I mean, if Warren is there, Tyler Warren is there, they should pick him. If not, they shouldn't pick him, obviously. They should pivot. Now, where are the positions to pivot to? I think low-key, interior offensive line could be a need, especially guard, right guard would be somewhere I would look, because the Colts like to really have a strong offensive line. This has been very much a part of their identity. When you think about Ballard and what he's done, and you think about even the offense and what they're going to run, right? Shane Steichen coming from Philadelphia and his strength in Philadelphia being the offensive line. Ideally, they want a very strong offensive line, and they had to let go of 2 starters this offseason. So I think O-line is low-key a need. I actually don't view wide receiver as a need, because Mitchell could be their number 1. Like, he could really break out this year. But the quarterback play is holding back their wide receiver play. That's the problem, right? Like, that's the problem. Alec Pierce is super underrated. Josh Downs is super underrated. Michael Pittman is like a 1B. So they have 4 guys that would be arguably like the best receiver on the Patriots. I mean, other than Diggs, maybe. Like that. So they have receivers. That's not a problem. Running back, maybe they could use a backup, but they did sign Khalil Herbert. He was kind of bad last year, though. Again, quarterback, if they pick somebody at quarterback, that wouldn't be crazy. Would they consider quarterback in the first round? Like, let's say Shedeur Sanders is there for them. Would they pick him? Would that be crazy? I don't know. I would consider it. I don't love Shedeur, but that's the guy that commonly goes up there. I'm putting that name in your face. Defensive line-wise, I think they're okay because Kwity Paye and Latu should be their guys. And then Epicam is good. Tyquan Lewis is solid. Defensive tackle could use a pick. Neville Gallimore is their 3, and he's not great as a 3. I feel like Buckner is getting older. Stewart's getting older. And while they're both very good players, they could use youth there. So defensive tackle could be a mid-round pick. I don't think they'll spend a first-round pick on it. I would be surprised. Linebacker also is a need, in my opinion. Zaire Franklin is very good, but they haven't re-signed EJ Speed, and they don't really have an answer for that linebacker 2 spot, in my opinion. So linebacker could be a guy as well. Linebacker, I mean, would they consider Campbell? in the first round, that could be interesting. Because you think about Cincinnati's defense, the new defense that they are running. I think they've got plenty of defensive linemen to run that system. I think they've upgraded their secondary with Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. I liked Sam Womack last year. They still got Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, Kenny Moore. They've got plenty of cornerback depth, in my opinion. Safety, Nick Cross is actually very underrated. Maybe they could use like a third safety a little bit later in the draft. So you think about that Cincinnati defense, and 2 linebackers play prominently. So you need like the Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt combination. So thinking about linebacker early could be a possibility, and then guard could be a possibility. Maybe quarterback and tight end as well, depending on who is there. Next up, you've got Jacksonville. Jacksonville needs defensive tackle, which it feels like Mason Graham is like a lock to go to their team. Defensive tackle is, in my opinion, their biggest need. Devon Hamilton and Mason Smith are both not great. Maybe it's not their biggest need. If Arik Armstead plays more at defensive tackle, that does kind of lessen the need. And Armstead, though, did decline last year. He's declined the last couple of seasons, and he is injured a lot, and he is old. So defensive tackle long-term is a pretty big need. It's on the top of the list. I actually think low-key wide receiver 2 is pretty high on the list because De'Ami Brown is not a wide receiver 2. Gabe Davis is garbage. And Parker Washington is just a slot player, and he's not even really a great one. So they do need another wide receiver, especially after losing Evan Ingram. I like Brenton Strange at tight end, though. I don't think that's a need. Offensive line, I would say that tackle is a need, and offensive line in general. But they've signed a center in Robert Hainsey, although he doesn't really make it so that you can't still draft somebody. They did sign Patrick McCarry. That is solidified. Ezra Cleveland is good, so that's solidified. Walker Little and Anton Harrison have not really turned out to be very good. So arguably those are needs, but left tackle could be a need for them. But I don't know if they're going to go that direction. I think running back is also another one where ETN kind of struggled last year. Tank Bigsby was good. I think Bigsby's underrated, actually. I wouldn't really be looking for a running back prominently in this draft, but maybe later, right? Maybe you're Bucky Irving, just saying, because obviously we got Duval back in the house. But yeah, looking at this team, I think that it's defensive tackle. I put down safety because I don't like Eric Murray. I don't think he's a starting caliber player. Wingard is always injured. Antonio Johnson is not great. Corner could be a need, but it feels like they signed Jordan Lewis to start, and Jerian Jones is starting caliber, and Tyson Campbell is a CB1. So I actually think safety is a bigger need than corner because even Darnell Savage is not amazing. So they could use a safety in the second or the third round. I would say that a defensive tackle or a wide receiver in the first round would be my ideal pick. Outside of Graham, I think McMillan would maybe be my second choice. But yeah, defensive tackle, safety, wide receiver, corner are my primary needs. I don't think they need linebacker. I don't really think they need edge as a primary need, but they do need depth. Maybe they sign some free agents. That's Jacksonville. Next up, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, I think, need guard, defensive end, and defensive tackle. Those are their primary needs. Otherwise, I don't think they need a receiver. Rashee Rice is back, Worthy, and Hollywood Brown. Plus, they still got Juju, who's a very good number 4, especially in their offense. And they still have Sky Moore. I don't know if he'll make the team. Offensive line-wise, I think that they could use a tackle, right? But they did sign Jalen Moore. So I think it's rather going to be a tackle that they draft to develop in the first or second round, right? Because even Jawan Taylor is not great. Like, let's be fair. Jawan Taylor is not great, and he's expensive. So tackle is one where they could pick first, second round. But at the same time, I would argue that starter right now, guard is a bigger need. Is Kingsley going to be their guard, or is Caliendo going to be their guard? Either way, it's a lackluster position. So if they could get a starting caliber guard in the third, second round, that would be big. Obviously, center and right guard are not a need. Wide receiver is not a need. I don't think running back is necessarily a high priority, although I wouldn't be shocked if they picked one because Pacheco was not great last year. Hunt is old and worn down, and Elijah Mitchell is not reliable. So I feel like running back later, like another Pacheco type, like 6th, 7th round, they could flirt with that. I think that tackle, guard will definitely be positions that they covet early. And I think defensive line will be the other area that they address. Defensive tackle is pretty lackluster now that they lost a couple pieces. They did add Jerry Tillery, but I think they could improve there at D tackle too. I don't know how much longer Mike Pennell can play in the NFL. Defensive end, they do need another guy on the opposite side of George Karlaftis and to kind of lessen the load of Charles Menahue, who didn't play that well last year, and Mike Dana, who's more of a 3, right? As you guys know. That being said, Felix is in year 3. They want him to step up, but he hasn't really done much, so they kind of busted on that pick. Linebacker is good. Corner is good. They added Christian Fulton. Safety, I think they're fine at safety. They just added Mike Edwards. They have Brian Cook. They have Jaden Hicks, who they like, Deion Bush. I think safety, they're fine. Maybe they could look later in the draft, but I think it's defensive tackle, defensive end, guard, and tackle. I think that, and running back maybe. I think those are the needs for the Chiefs. It's pretty obvious. It's offensive and defensive line. The Las Vegas Raiders are up next. The Raiders. And again, the Las Vegas Raiders I should have had Los Angeles, but again, I don't know. Should I have Los Angeles ahead? I don't know how the alphabet works. Anyways, the Raiders are up next, and the Raiders also have a lot of needs, but I would also say that they just released Jack Jones, which I think only increases the cornerback need because Jack Jones was listed as a starter, and he was a starter for Antonio Pierce's team, and he was good for their team. His problem is not his play. It's his brain and his decision-making off the field. That's why he was let go, not because of talent. And you look at their cornerback depth chart right now, it is not good. I mean, Eric Stokes, Richardson, and Jacorian Bennett. I know they like Bennett a little bit. He's long and he's fast, and same with Eric Stokes. So they can work with that in this defense under Pete Carroll. But I don't love that. They need a corner really badly. But the thing is, they pick at 6. So are they going to pick a corner as high as 6? I mean, I don't think Travis Hunter's going to be there. Do they want Will Johnson? I mean, that would be the archetype for Pete Carroll. But how much influence are they going to have in terms of the style of defense they're playing? Is this going to be more of a Pete Carroll defense, or is this going to be more of a Patriot-esque style that they've been running? So that, I mean, I don't know. They don't have a lot of man-to-man ability out there, in my opinion, but we'll see. Safety, Jeremy Chin and Lonnie Johnson were signed. I don't think that's a huge need. I think they've taken care of that overall. Linebacker is not ideal. I kind of like Tommy Eichenberg as a developmental player. Devin White was signed as well as Landon Roberts. Roberts can start. He's not a great starter, but he can start, and he's a good leader. Eichenberg is a similar type of player, though. White, I would not rely on to be a starter, but he has the upside to be a starter, that's for sure, and he will get his opportunity. I don't think linebacker would be a position that I would be looking for I don't think it's that important based on their needs. Like, I think that they should really be looking at corner early, wide receiver, running back. That, I don't think they need to pick a running back early necessarily. A lot of people think they do. And this is where I'm a little bit off with the Ashton Genty, just because, like, would I rather have a wide receiver 1 like McMillan at 6? Would I rather have a guy like maybe Will Johnson at 6 to really help out some of my big important positions of need? Running back is more of a cherry on top, right? It's not the cake. You know what I'm saying? Like, you've got Raheem Mostert, you've got Sincere McCormick, you've got Zamir White. Those guys can carry the ball. They're not awful. And then you can draft like a 3rd or 4th round running back and maybe even have him be the starter because this is a very talented running back class. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Raiders did pass on Genty. Maybe even decided to trade back. Like, I would rather than pick McMillan at 6. I'd rather than pick a corner at 6. I think those are bigger needs. I also think they should address linebacker. I think they should maybe address defensive tackle, although I don't think it's like a crazy big need. Their offensive line I like. I'm not worried about that. I think quarterback they shouldn't really be looking at this year. Save that for the future. Geno Smith is their guy. Obviously, they have Brock Bowers. So wide receiver 1, CB 1, the 2 biggest needs. After that, you can talk yourself into running back, linebacker, defensive tackle. Next, you've got the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers. They need quite a bit for a team that is, kind of discussed the way they are. They to me need a wide receiver one on the perimeter because I don't think it's no longer Mike Williams. Chargers fans might talk themselves into that because they re-signed Mike Williams, but he was horrible last year. So he would have to really rejuvenate himself for that to happen. I think he's more of a depth piece that plays situationally based on his frame, his size, and his chemistry with Herbert. Quentin Johnston is more of a 3 than a 2 because he's too unreliable. And Ladd McConkey is a very good player, but they need a player on the outside to take pressure off of him and to make plays. So wide receiver would be a position more so than tight end. I can understand tight end based on the best player available at wherever they pick, I think 22, 23, somewhere around there. But they did sign Tyler Conklin, which maybe lessens the need with Will Dissly and Tyler Conklin being NFL professional tight ends. Right? I think their biggest upgrade would be had at wide receiver 1. But again, it's Greg Roman. Greg Roman loves tight ends. So that's where they might prioritize tight ends and the hybrid nature of having multiple tight ends to work with. Also, they're a run-heavy team. I do think that center has been taken care of with Bradley Bozeman and Andre James. Either way, they should have a starter there. I think that the offensive line, they did their business with Mekhi Becton. They have 2 very good tackles, even 3 with Trey Pipkins. Zion Johnson, they just need him to play better. But I think that he was a first-round pick in 2022. They're going to give him another opportunity. So offensive line won't even be discussed for them, I don't think. I think it's really going to come down to playmaker on offense, wide receiver, or tight end. Then after that, defensively, I think defensive tackle is a need because right now they've got Ogunbanya, Tart, and Hand starting as like an interior 3. That's not impressive. I think the defensive tackle could be a first-round pick, and I wouldn't be surprised. None of those guys are disruptors. None of those guys are game changers. None of those guys are field tilters. So I think defensive tackle is going to be a first or second-round pick. I think edge, they could use depth, but right now they've got Khalil Mack and the kid Thule from last year actually played very well. He led the team in sacks. Bud Dupree is also a decent 3 or 4 as an edge, even though he's a little older. I think linebacker is good. I'm not concerned about that. Safety is great. Not concerned about that. Corner, they did address through free agency with Dante Jackson and Benjamin St-Juste, but neither are reliable. So I think they could use a corner early. So the way I would put it, wide receiver, defensive tackle, corner, and then I put tight end and edge as other needs that I would look at for them. So I could see tight end, wide receiver, or defensive tackle being their first pick, and if not those positions, second and third round, and then after that, corner, and that sort of deal. But Harbaugh is going to have a big influence because of his familiarity with this draft class. Next, we've got the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, I don't have a lot of needs for them. Cornerback, linebacker, and center are the obvious ones. I think that linebacker, they really need. They don't have a very good player at linebacker. I mean, Omar Speights is fine. Nate Landman has shown some flashes. They signed him from, I think, the Falcons last year. But they could use a stud at linebacker. So if they could find one in the first 2 rounds, that could really uplift this defense, and having a game-changing flow sideline-to-sideline linebacker would really uplift a part of their team that they don't really have a stud at. Because their defensive front is awesome otherwise, but a guy that could really uplift them is that really good linebacker play. Corner also like a CB1 if they could find one, because Darius Williams is fine as a 2. I like Akilla Witherspoon, Quentin Lake at nickelback. So, when you really look at them, I feel like linebacker is actually a bigger need than corner, but both are needs. Defensive line, they're fine. It's only depth. Poona Ford kind of really upgrades their one spot where they were a little weaker in Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown is just a little one-dimensional, more of rotation. Poona Ford is like a solid starter. But otherwise, you got Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Braden Fisk, and Jared Verse. So you're good there. So I'm not really worried about defensive line. It's more so linebacker, corner, maybe safety, but I think they spent money on Cam Curl, Cameron Kitchens as developing. Maybe they could add another safety there just as a third safety or a rotation player with Kitchens. But I think it's pretty obvious. And then center would be the one position on offense. I mean, unless they want Bo Limmer or Coleman Shelton to be their starter, I feel like center could low-key be a need that they look at in the first, second, or third round. Probably not the first, but the second or the third round. And I wouldn't be surprised if they targeted one of the top centers in the draft. Tight end is interesting, but Tyler Higbee, he should be healthy the whole year. Kobe Parkinson, they signed last offseason. Quarterback is always floating in the back of your mind, but they do have Jimmy Garoppolo as a solid backup, and I think they're all in on winning right now. So I don't view quarterback as being a high priority for them. I think they'll wait until they have to pick a quarterback after extending Matthew Stafford. So wide receiver is also not a need. I think they like Whittington as their 4, Atwell as their 3. They re-signed him, and Adams is obviously replacing Kupp. So it's going to be corner, it's going to be linebacker, it's going to be center for the Rams. It's pretty obvious. Next up, you've got the Miami Dolphins, who continue to add needs. Now, the first need I just have is offensive line in general. Now they just lost Armstead. Their tackle position is desperate. Patrick Paul is currently their starter. He is iffy. Austin Jackson has always been iffy. James Daniels at guard is coming off an Achilles. Liam Eichenberg is at left guard, and Aaron Brewer. This is one of the worst offensive lines on paper in the NFL. You take Armstead away from it, and all of a sudden, it is desperation time. So I think offensive line should be the pick in the first round, honestly, because I think they can find a veteran defensive tackle to go alongside Zach Sealer and be fine for this season. They'll be fine. And they could probably find a defensive tackle in the third round and be okay. It should be offensive line early and often. Wide receiver, they're fine. Running back, they're fine. Quarterback, they know what they have. Tight end, they know what they have. And Jonnu Smith was a great find for them. So it's going to be offensive line, tackle, guard, center, all of them, all of the positions. Center, Connor Williams ended up nothing. He got hurt and worn down. James Daniels, that's kind of like a short-term player maybe, but you got to see how healthy he is. So, yeah, offensive line, man. Offensive line. Then defensively, corner, you don't want Duck Storm or Storm Duck or whatever his name is starting at corner in the NFL. So you need a corner. Also, Cam Smith is not developed. And Kohu is a good nickel. He's fine at nickel, but he's bad on the outside. So I think they need a CB2. I think they need safety. I like their linebackers. Jordan Brooks, Tyrell Dodson. He fit in really well. They signed Willie Gay, KJ Britt. Those are starting caliber linebackers. Their edge position's very good with Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips, and Bradley Chubb. They're good at edge. They're good at linebacker. They need a CB2. They need some safeties. Despite signing Ashton Davis and Melon Fonwu, they can get away with those players. So that's maybe more of a third or fourth round need. But defensive tackle is going to be a second or third round need. Offensive line, just everywhere they possibly can, is going to be a need. Then you've got the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota, I have safety, corner, and guard for the Vikings. Now, I think left guard is a need because I don't love Blake Brendel. So left guard could be their first round pick, and I wouldn't be surprised. If not, I don't think the Vikings have that many picks. So I definitely think they're going to go guard. And honestly, they don't have a lot of needs. They've taken care of a lot of business throughout free agency, whether it be depth at receiver. They just got Rondell Moore to be their 4. Then they've got Ryan Kelly and Will Fries to be their starting center and their starting right guard. They've got their tackles. There's no problem there. They've got 2 tight ends. They've got multiple running backs now that they added Jordan Mason. JJ is their quarterback. Defensive line, they've got Phillips, Hargrave, and Allen. So they're good on the interior, 3 caliber players there. Then they've got 3 edge rushers with Turner, Grenard, and Van Ginkel. I like Cashman and Pace, and they also added Eric Wilson. So I don't think they're going to look at linebackers. So really, it's going to be safety. But, you look at safety, Metellus and Smith for the short term is good. So it depends how focused they are on short term and long term. I think short term and long term, corner is a bigger need than safety, I would say. Because I think Metellus and Smith can play. But that being said, Metellus is more of like a hybrid player. So he's not really a starting every down safety. So that's tough. I mean, they did sign a bunch of corners. So they signed Isaiah Rodgers, who can start. I think they like Mekhi Blackman. Byron Murphy is a good player. Thomas is a good backup. Okuda sucks, but he's on the roster. So that's tough. Safety or corner could go their first round pick, or guard. any of those picks. So I just think their first 3 picks will be spent on those 3 positions in any way, shape, or form or order. Anything else would surprise me because they really don't need anything else. Maybe they would take a shot on a backup quarterback later in the draft, but that's just icing on top. Again, they could maybe even double up at guard or something like that. Double up at safety, double up at corner, add a defensive lineman, but I don't think it's going to be a high priority. So Vikings are pretty easy. Next, you got the New England Patriots, baby, my Patriots. They're also very easy. Despite not being a good team last year, the Patriots have clear identifiable needs. It's wide receiver, tackle, specifically left. And then after that, guys, I mean, guard / interior offensive line and maybe edge rusher. I don't think edge rush is one of those positions where it's kind of one of those positions where if you can get a stud like Abdul Carter, you pick him, but you don't need an edge rusher. You've got Landry, you've got White, and you've got Jennings. So you don't need one, but if you could find a stud, that would take this group over the top. So I would understand the Carter pick. That's why I add it. If you want to go for like a developmental guy in like the 4th or 5th round, I'd get that as well. Or 3rd round, I'd get that as well, right? Running back is another area where I'm like, okay, like Ramondre, I'm fine with Ramondre. I like Ramondre. I like Antonio Gibson. But running back, a 3rd down running back for Josh McDaniels, that could be a later round pick or a mid-round pick, and I wouldn't be shocked. Wide receiver, it should come in the first 2 rounds, in my opinion. Despite adding Stephon Diggs and Mac Hollins, I think that wide receiver should be a priority for this team still. And if it comes, in the form of Travis Hunter, I'll be elated. But if not, they're going to have to pivot and find out what they do at 4 is going to dictate what they do in the 2nd and the 3rd, right? Because let's say Hunter's not there, Will Campbell's the pick at left tackle. Well, now you've solidified your left tackle, and Adrian Lowe can be a good backup. No problems there. And then honestly, you're hoping that Robinson or Strange take care of business at guard. So guard, and then even City and they signed Schweister or whatever his name is. He's played 1 million snaps in the NFL. Long-term right tackle is also a need, but you're hoping that Morgan Moses can solidify that for the next 2 years. So maybe a developmental tackle, but that's kind of Caden Wallace already. So I kind of feel like the Patriots, it's left tackle, it's wide receiver, it's like running back, defensive end, and then guard tackle. Guard tackle development. I don't think corner is not anywhere close to being a need. I wouldn't pick it. Safety, I wouldn't pick a single safety. I wouldn't pick a linebacker. I would pick defensive. I would pick edge with traits, offensive line, probably multiple times, wide receiver, probably only once. I'd just spend a high pick on it because they have a ton of depth at receiver. They just need a stud. That's what they're missing. So Patriots, there you go. The New Orleans Saints. The Saints, they have a few different needs, and I feel like a lot of people are getting their needs wrong. It's kind of frustrating, and even Turtle brought it up in the comments. Their offensive line does need some help. They were atrocious last year. I feel like guard could definitely use an upgrade because right now Dylan Redunz is listed as their starter. Good luck with that. Fuaga, it makes it interesting with Penning on the tackle position because Fuaga is good, but will he play left or will he play right in terms of he could play left, right, guard. It doesn't really matter. So they could just pick the best lineman if they want. They could pick whoever they want on the offensive line in the 1st or 2nd round and just fit him in. And then they can move their pieces around as see fit. Now, Eric McCoy is obviously their center, so they don't need a center. But a left tackle could be a pick. A right tackle could be a pick. Trevor Penning is not that great, right? So they could replace him. Cesar Ruiz is okay, so they're fine there. But I think guard or tackle early would make a lot of sense. Wide receiver, they're good. They don't need a wide receiver. Stop. Unless they're going to trade Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed, they don't need a receiver. They just added Brandon Cooks. He's a good 3, and Cedric Wilson can be more than a 4. That's fine. Okay. Running back, sure. Long-term, they could use one, but they're still going to ride with Alvin Kamara as far as I know. They re-signed Jawan Johnson, so that they shouldn't be looking at tight end, and Foster Moreau has been fine. I don't think they're going to pick quarterback. I doubt it. I think they'll give Derek Carr 1 more year. Maybe they'll pick a quarterback in the later rounds again. They'll take another Spencer Rattler type of pick. Defensive end could be a pick, but I don't think it necessarily has to be early because Carl Granderson, Cam Jordan, and Chase Young, and Foskey was also a second-round pick. Like, they have enough there. It's not amazing, but they have other needs that are bigger. Like, corner is a huge need for them. Isaac Yiadom is not an ideal CB1 or CB2. Kool-Aid is not a CB2 or CB1 or CB3. Maybe CB3. Alontae Taylor is not very good. Like, corner is bad for this team. So I would look at corner early in the draft for them. So my needs, as listed, CB, guard / offensive line, edge. Those were the needs I saw most. Linebacker, they're good. They got 2 linebackers. They can get a long-term replacement for Demario Davis when that comes up. Safety, they signed Justin Reed. They have Tyrann Mathieu. Howden's decent. So I feel like offensive line, cornerback, and, D-line. That's the Saints for me, and then maybe like a shot at a quarterback. Next, you've got the New York Giants. The G-men are picking high in this draft, and they need a few things. So you've got guard and center as positions that I think they should pick, because Michael Schmitz has not proven himself as a starting caliber center. So I'd look at center. John Runyon and Greg Van Roten are not great guards. So I think guard and center should be picks in the middle rounds. I think more so than tackle, where I like what they did by adding 2 veteran tackles behind Thomas and Illuminor to provide some depth. Quarterback should not be the pick this year based on adding Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. If they want a quarterback, I think it should be more of a 2nd or 3rd round pick than it is a Shedeur Sanders at 3. I would just pick Travis Hunter and get arguably the most electric player in the draft at both wide receiver and cornerback, and just take care of that. I don't think wide receiver is a huge need. I think corner is a bigger need for them. It might be the biggest need on their team. It's one of them. But if you can get 2 number 1 receivers, you want to have 2 number 1 receivers, ideally. And that could be it with Neighbors and Hunter. Defensive tackle, I think they're fairly strong with Roy Robertson Harris, Nunez Roches, and Dexter Lawrence, although they could maybe add a younger guy there. Edge, they're good, but again, you can't really pass up Abdul Carter if he's there. It's likely going to come down to, okay, like, let's say that Hunter goes 2. Would they pick Carter at 3? Would they trade back? Would they pick Sanders at 3? It's a huge question. Honestly, if I were them, I'd just pick Carter. And I know that they have Brian Burns, and I know that they have Kayvon Thibodeau. I'm not a huge Thibodeau guy anyways. I'd pick Carter. Linebacker, I think they're sneaky decent. Corner, they definitely improve with Paulson Adebo. Safety, they definitely improve with Javon Holland. I don't think safety is much of a need anymore. Drew Phillips is a good nickel. So, yeah, the way I have it listed as guard center in the middle rounds, right? Cornerback, depending on what happens with Hunter, should be still a priority, although you're counting on Banks to develop a little bit more. Hopefully better as a CB2. Quarterback at some point. Wide receiver, maybe. They have a lot of maybe. It's like they don't have one position where I'm like, wow, they desperately need this spot, in my opinion, Giants fans. But they have a lot of positions where it's like, well, they could get better here. They could be better here, right? The biggest one being quarterback, that's for sure. Next up, you've got the New York Jets. Tight end, right tackle, wide receiver, and safety. Okay? Tight end, obvious. They have the worst tight end room in the NFL. Stone Smart, I like. I think he's got upside. I like that pickup, but I'm not starting him in the NFL. Right tackle is another huge need. It's arguably the worst right tackle position in the NFL. So right tackle and tight end need to be addressed very early in this draft. Wide receiver 2 is also very lackluster. I mean, Josh Reynolds, Malachi Corley, Tyler Johnson, Xavier Gibson. None of these guys are 2s. They're more like 3s. So they need a wide receiver 2. We'll see if Garrett Wilson makes it on the block or not. Quarterback is obviously a need long-term, but they're giving Justin Fields the short-term to develop this team. Running back should not be a pick despite the rumors. And then otherwise, defensively, I think it's mostly just safety. I think what they did in free agency was enough at defensive tackle with Derek Nandi to replace Solomon Thomas and who was their other D tackle? They had another guy. I can't remember. And then corner, they replaced DJ Reed with Brandon Stevens. Not a great replacement, but it makes it so that they at least have 3 starting caliber corners. And they did add Andre Sisco to safety. So they do have a 1-2 in Tony Adams and Andre Sisco, but Andre Sisco is only a 1 year. So I'd look at safety a little bit as a development player for their head coach, who is Aaron Glenn, who is a defensive back guy. Right tackle and tight end should be huge priorities. And after that, it should be wide receiver. And it's pretty easy. I mean, the Jets, they don't have a lot of needs. Their biggest problem, they have 3 drastic needs, and then they have a bad quarterback, which hurts their team entirely. The Philadelphia Eagles are next. I got safety, linebacker, defensive line, and offensive line. They're always going to pick their defensive line and offensive line, and that could come at any point in the draft, depending on their perspective on the prospects at the given point when they're picking. So defensive line and offensive line can never be counted out in the early rounds, despite the players that they already have there, right? Offensive line would be more shocking because they do have a solidified 5 of really good players. That being said, Lane Johnson is kind of ancient at this point. So, a tackle wouldn't be like absolutely shocking. It would just be more of a future pick than a current pick. Safety, linebacker are more immediate needs that I think they need to address, but there's still free agency in June, July, and August to help them out on a team like this where people want to play for them because they're going to win. But safety, they need to get somebody better than Sidney Brown opposite Reed Blankenship, and they need to replace Nakobe Dean for this season, probably, at least, and to complement Zach Bond. So it's pretty easy. Defensive tackle depth, edge depth, although they took care of edge depth quite a bit with Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche. I think what they're hoping for is they get more out of Bryce Huff, more out of Hunt to replace Josh Sweat, which was a big loss. And then obviously they lost Milton Williams, so they won't be quite as good there at defensive tackle, but they like their guys that they still have, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Ajomo. They've got 3 guys at both spots, but they could still pick guys at those spots. All right, next up, we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are just confusing because it depends on what happens with Aaron Rodgers. If Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback becomes still a need for the long term, but not an immediate need, which lessens the degree of the impact of the pick in the first round. Like, would they pick one in the first round if Aaron Rodgers is not their guy? That is going to tell us the story. Like, is he going to be signed by the draft or not? That's a question. You would hope so. Then we would have a clear picture. But you don't want Mason Rudolph to be your quarterback. You don't want Skylar Thompson to be your quarterback. So quarterback is going to be picked for them, Aaron Rodgers or not. It's just going to depend on what round it's going to be picked in. Guard, I think, is a need because McCormick is fine but not great. Sayamalu's good but a little bit older. So I think guard could be a pick at some point in the draft. I like their 3 wide receivers. And plus they got Roman Wilson, who didn't really play last year. They can develop him. Defensive tackle is a need for the long term. Behind Cameron Hayward, they need a developmental guy. So that could be their first pick if Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback. That could also be the 2nd or 3rd round pick. I would aim for the 2nd or 3rd round for defensive tackle. Linebacker is very strong for them. They've got 4 starting caliber linebackers. They've got 3 edge players. They don't need that position. Nickelback is a position that I would look at despite signing Brandon Eccles. I still think that's a need. So that could be a relatively high choice, as well as corner, because Darius Slay is probably only playing 1 more year. So, and running back could be their first pick. I mean, Jaylen Warren is good. Probably they want a guy in the 2nd or 3rd or the 4th at running back, because Warren is still a guy that you want to give the ball 15-ish times. So somebody that can play off of Warren would be ideal, in my opinion. That's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next up, the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are in need of defensive line and offensive line. Their defensive tackle position is one of the worst in football. I think Evan Anderson will be in the rotation. Kevin Givens, Jordan Elliott, these guys are depth players, but not starters. So I think defensive tackle, ideally, if they could land a stud at 11, that would be the pick. But edge could also be the pick because Yetur Gross-Matos is not a starter. So I think best caliber defensive lineman should be their first pick. After that, I think they should be looking in the middle rounds for rather the best choice of an offensive or defensive lineman. And then after that, I think they should be looking to add maybe a corner. They took care of safety. I actually like D. Winters, so I don't think linebacker is a huge need. But I think it's primarily, guys, it's primarily defensive line, offensive line early in the first like 3-ish rounds, and then they can just target whatever else they want. I would not be targeting running back. I would not be targeting tight end quite yet for them, despite George Kittle's age. I would not be targeting wide receiver. I'd be trying to replenish the defense in the rest of the draft, trying to add depth linebacker, depth safety, depth corner, all those sort of positions in the 4th through 7th round. That would be my target. Next, you got the Seattle Seahawks, who honestly, Seattle should have been ahead of San Francisco, I believe, or at least on our lads. I don't know. They need interior offensive line, center and guard is their biggest needs, in my opinion. Bradford, these guys suck. Like, they need some offensive linemen. I would be going offensive line, probably with 2 of my first 3 picks. I'm not even lying. The only way I would pivot from that is if I absolutely fell in love with a cornerback prospect. If like I loved Barron and I wanted him in the first round, sure, I'll pick him. But other than that, I'd pick a guard or a center in the first 3 picks of my draft because their interior is atrocious. It's one of the worst, if not the worst in the NFL. So corner is the secondary need as a CB2 on the perimeter. And then wide receiver, I think, is a long-term need. Valdez-Scantling's a 1-year deal. Cooper Kupp's older than dirt. And linebacker is like a little bit of a depth need in the draft. Pretty simple, honestly. Interior O-line should be huge for them. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are next up. Safety, corner, linebacker, and edge are the needs for Tampa Bay. Offensive line, good. Quarterback, good. Running back, 2 of them. Wide receivers, 3 of them for now. Maybe even Sterling Shepard, 4. Interior D-line is actually one of the strongest in the league. Edge, they did address with Hassan Reddick, but I think he wasn't good last year. So that's still a need in my opinion. I'd still be looking at that. If I really liked an edge player, I'd be all over them because I think their pass rush has been one of the main reasons they haven't quite gotten there the last couple of years. Linebacker long-term is a huge need. Levante David is old and the rest of the linebacker depth chart is naked. So they need a linebacker big time. If Campbell were to land to them, that would be beautiful. Safety-wise, I think they could use a safety, so I think that will be a relatively high pick as well. They do got Izine and Tyke Smith. Both these guys can play safety corner-ish, but I think they need corner, safety, linebacker as their top 3 needs. And after that, I think edge. So defense for Todd Bowles. It should be pretty easy for Jason Light because their offense is well taken care of. The Tennessee Titans, obviously quarterback, but beyond quarterback, they're going to pick Cam Ward. It's going to be wide receiver for me. After Calvin Ridley, they need a number 2 receiver. Van Jefferson is not that. Treylon Burks has not proven to be that. Treylon Burks as your 3 with upside, okay, I can buy into it. See, wide receiver 2, that you need a young quarterback to rely on, no thanks. Give me another wide receiver. Offensive line, I don't think will be a high priority because they already spent so much capital on guys like Kevin Zeitler and Dan Moore. They've got Chigakwanko at tight end. Running back, they're good. Even backup quarterback with Levis, they should be fine. Interior D-line, that's one of their strengths with Sebastian Joseph-Day, Devondre Sweat, and Jeffrey Simmons. They need edge really badly. Their pass rush is terrible on the edge. I mean, Arden Key as your best pass rusher is not a good look. Draymond Jones is a better rusher from the interior than the edge. So you need an edge rusher. So after your first pick, it should be wide receiver or edge. And then the 2nd or 3rd round, wide receiver or edge. And then after that, it should be linebacker, in my opinion. I think Xavier Woods takes care of the safety. Short term, corner, you still got Snead and Roger McCreary. You do need a corner maybe later in the draft, but I don't think that you could even sign somebody. The Washington Commanders are final. Edge, safety, corner, running back, and wide receiver are positions that I think they could use. Edge being the most prominent, in my opinion. I think they need a guy that can dominate from the edge for Dan Quinn. That could be a matchup issue. That can be a go-to rusher. That can be a dominant force. Okay, so edge. I mean, you look at edge right now. Dorrance Armstrong's more of a 2 than a 1. Clellan Farrell is more of a 3. Dietrich Wise has always been a 3, and he's old. Jacob Martin is a 4 or 3. He's a situational rusher. Defensive tackle, I think they've taken care of that with the contract from Javon Kinlaw, despite me not loving him. Newton was a 2nd-round pick. Eddie Goldman is a good run stuffer. Sheldon Day also has played quite a bit in the NFL. So they've got a lot of depth at D tackle. I don't think that will be a big pick. Defensive end, maybe even multiple. should be selected in this draft. But I think probably I would just spend like my best pick on it just to get like the best possible prospect. Then I've got enough depth around that to solidify it. Then linebacker, yeah, they're old, but I think for now they're fine. Cornerback, I think that they're on paper, they need a nickel corner, but Jonathan Jones should be able to help them out there, either at outside or inside. So I think edge is their biggest need. After that, safety is definitely a need. I think safety second or third round would be a pick for me. Will Harris, I'm not a huge fan of. He's got hybrid capability. Quan Martin's interesting. I like him, but they could use an upgrade over Will Harris as a starting safety. Will Harris is more of a 3 in my opinion. Running back is sneaky. Running back is sneaky because Brian Robinson's not a game changer. In this class, they could use a game changer. Their O-line's pretty good after adding Laramie Tunzel. Their wide receiver position's pretty good after adding Debo, but they could use another receiver in the later rounds. So that's how I see every need for every team in the NFL draft. I know it was long, it was deep, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. Subscribe, jabronis. Peace.